Coming to insurance, actually insurance is pretty interesting. Let me give you some interesting facts so you understand how interesting it is. If I look at insurance typically, and if I speak of general insurance industry in India, it has a combined ratio close to 115 to 120%, which means that for every 100 rupees earning, outgo is close to 115 or to 120 for the past now from 2007 for the past 14-15 years. Which means that the industry really pays claim very well, no? Because it's beyond what it should be able to afford as paying claim. But from the pricing perspective, it's very priced well and pays claim well. But you ask somebody on the street what's their view on insurance, they would say these guys don't pay claims. So it's a very funny statement, yeah. The fact shows that the industry is paying claims really well, but the perception is not so. That's the first point. The second point is the cost of insurance. I think I have such eminent panelists, such well-read, such knowledgeable people, very digital, the best in class. If I ask them how many of them actually have a retail cyber insurance for themselves, they can raise their hand, or they can say, speak out here. None, yeah. And the cost of a retail cyber insurance will cover phishing, malware, stalking, you name it, anything that is not, I think the lower end is 7 rupees for a year. Can you beat that? Yeah. But, and it's such high risk today. Like when you pick up newspaper, anything, all these frauds happening, all this malware, phishing, or cyber ransom, you hear about it. It's a real threat. And I think it has moved up by thousands of percentage points in lockdown, and people are losing money continuously. But if you ask, and all those listening to it, just ask you this question: do you have a retail cyber insurance cover for yourself as an individual? I'm very surprised if somebody says yes. Okay, now let me, if I again ask a very simple question, that how much do you think a 1 lakh rupee cover, just to give an idea, would cost for a year from a personal accident perspective? That is, an accidental death perspective. The premium cost is 40 rupees a year. For 1 lakh, which means that if you talk of 10 lakhs, you're talking of just what, 400 rupees a year. You're talking of less than like close to about a rupee or 1.5 rupee per day kind of per 10 lakh cover. So the affordability is also there. So I'll give you another interesting statement now. If you look at in the COVID time, a cover for COVID, which anybody can get COVID, and the premium is about 607 rupees a year. And the cover would be very comfortable. So if you get let's say the average cost of COVID treatment is about 2 lakh rupees in a hospital. So for that you're paying about 600 rupees. No underwriting, just some waiting period for 15 days or 1 month, depending on the policy condition. 3 clicks you can buy your policy, and the cost is just about 600, which means that everybody and anybody should be having that cover, because nobody knows who'll get COVID, and that's the treatment. In India, if you look at health insurance, about 30-40 crore below poverty line is covered by the government schemes. About 10-15 crores are covered by insurance companies. For a population of 130 crores, we're talking about 75 crore people not covered by health. And we're not talking of poor people below poverty line. That's already covered by government. Yeah? We're talking of people who can afford comfortably a couple of rupees per day, which meant that about 70 crore people should have bought the corona policy, which is easily available on any website, costing about, let's say, 2 rupees, 3 rupees a day, and even in corona, straight through process, 2 clicks. But it doesn't happen. So the funny part of insurance is it is required by everybody. The risks are high, prevalent. But when the house is on fire, then we realize that we require a policy. It's too late. If your house is already burning, you can't get a fire insurance for that now. And the cost is hardly anything. In fact, I remember a lot of our Indian parents, especially mother, tells us that save money for the rainy day. But technically, if you actually have bought insurances, which will cost much less than the savings that you have, you actually spend money and have a great time yourself, and be actually very secure. Instead of trying to save in all your money and cutting down on all your trips, cutting down all that you wanted to have in life, because saving for rainy day can be easily covered by insurance. So the challenge here is not about the product, the pricing, the need. The challenge here is that most of us, and it's across the world, not only for India, don't perceive that things can go wrong for us. Ability to see risk is very, very low. I think that is something which is there. And it's good for the human civilization, because if we were too obsessed about risk, maybe we not stepped out of caves. No, so I think that is fine. And this is precisely why I think the insurance need comes at the last requirement, which is fine. Now, one way is you try addressing people, talk to them, attend forums, convey that, okay, this is the pricing, this is the product, no, is very much required for you. Other is, if you look at across the world, no, if I look at insurance penetration and the role of government is very interesting. If you look at, let us say, in India, now motor insurance is mandatory, by law. Motor third party is mandatory by law. If you don't have it, the police checks, and if you don't have it, you have a challan. This is because it's mandatory by law to have an insurance cover. So the motor insurance penetration in India would be very high. There are countries where it is not mandatory by law to have insurance of motor. In those countries, the insurance penetration of motor is very, very low. So I think again the problem is that when the government steps in, and why is it mandatory for motor insurance to be there? Well, what is the benefit that the government gets if motor is mandatory? I don't think there's any benefit of the government. The issue is that if somebody dies in a motor accident or somebody gets hurt, the liability in India is unlimited, which means I can say that for a scooter claim, a two-wheeler claim, I have a 15 crore claim, because somebody got killed by a two-wheeler. So do we owning a two-wheeler realize that if we're not insured, there can be liability of 15 crores on us? We would be thinking, if this two-wheeler is not insured, okay, it may cost me about 10,000 rupees, 20,000 rupees to repair, but it can lead to 15 crore liability on us, because the unlimited liability on third party is there in India. And that is why it is mandatory by law to have an insurance cover. Because if your vehicle meets an accident and somebody dies or somebody gets injured, there's a huge liability which comes through. And if you can't afford it, then the poor guy who has died or somebody who's got grievously injured does not get the requisite support. It's a societal requirement that you be ensured that if something goes wrong, a compensation can be paid to the person, so his family is not left in the dark. So insurance has a huge societal role to play, and that is why the mandatory thing comes into picture. Okay, the other thing, let's say look at below poverty line, the health cover. So by the Prime Minister's scheme, 40 crore Indians below poverty line got covered, national health scheme. What is the impact of that on the Indian average life expectancy? Have you ever thought about it? If 40 crore Indians get covered by health insurance, the average life expectancy of Indians will move up by 5 to 7 years. Why? Simply because one of the reasons why expectancy comes down, let's say if I look at expectancy in Uganda, it will be close to 40 plus. In Japan is 90 plus. The difference is healthcare and access to healthcare. The moment you have 5 lakhs sum insured in the hands of people, even in the remotest corner of India, suddenly the healthcare, you watch all these people talking about moving to tier 2, tier 3, all the big hospital chains and others, because they realize that now people can afford good treatment. So immediately there's expansion of healthcare and health services across the country. The fallout is such that healthcare moves, expansion moves up, you have more infrastructure coming in, which means the average life expectancy of Indians move up by 5 to 7 years. A simple thing like covering people below poverty line by a good sum insured for health moves up the average expectancy of Indians. Now that is when the government steps in again and does that part. Let's look at pandemic. Are we aware that we have a terrorism pool? So when the Bombay incident happened, actually the insurance companies paid out for the entire terrorist activity which happened. On a pandemic also, if a pool gets created, then all the issue of migrant laborers moving out in the beginning and all the trauma that was suffered when the lockdown happened, and also to some extent led to the spread of the virus, could have been avoided if people had cover for pandemic. And it was already present. It was before the pandemic struck also. Wimbledon, we all heard about it. They had this pandemic cover, and with pandemic cancellation, huge amount of claims got paid out. Even today, if a pool gets created a pandemic, where the government and the insurance companies chip in, then actually if a pandemic strikes again, then all the standing charges, that means the salary of people or the expenses for a factory, even when it's closed, gets paid. Which means that all the migrant laborers, all the employees, no layoff happens, people keep their job, which does not lead to an economic crisis, which does not lead to a trauma being held, or being people moved anywhere. So insurance, again, to some data, like my friend when he mentioned about mutual funds, insurance are the biggest contributor to the government money in terms of infrastructure development. I think most of the money of insurance companies have to be put into government things. So are you aware that I think about 1/6 of the total money which is deployed in the government comes from insurance companies, which is there, in lines of lakhs of crores. Are we aware that insurance industry is the largest employer of people? No, about 6 million people get directly employed, and indirectly, would run into very comfortably about 20 million people or so. Are we aware that the insurance industry, when a crisis happens, be it floods or be it cyclones, are the biggest bill? I remember my own company, Bajaj Insurance Company, when Srinagar flood happened. In Srinagar, we have 50% market share. When Srinagar flood happened, we gave out close to 1,200 crores in just 3 months' time and paid money door to door, while the entire money which came in from other sources were not equivalent to 300 crores. Insurance companies are the biggest bailout in terms of when things go wrong. So the challenge here is, one, our thinking that it cannot go wrong for us, and the cost of it is incidental and very small. That is something we should be addressing it. And second is government intervention, looking at a much higher scale, creating a pandemic pool is something which has to be done, where it benefits the society at a much larger scale. It benefits us individuals much larger scale than what you can think about.